Hey guys, a little bit of fun in medieval times today, a little bit off the lesson plan, but here we go. It should be a lot of fun. So, in the Middle Ages, there were no national flags because there weren't really nations the way that we think about it. Of course, there would be the king of the country, but the king was not terribly powerful. The only way a king could get an army is by asking all his noblemen to bring their armies together. And what if the noblemen didn't like the king? There were many, many, many times that the noblemen had massive armies that were loyal to themselves, and so they either ignored the king or attacked and killed the king and made themselves king. That happens so many times. All the power is in the noblemen, not the central government, not the king. Really, it's the small noble houses and medium-sized and bigger noble houses as well. So because there weren't really nations the way we think about it today, there weren't national flags either. That doesn't mean there were no flags or no items or symbols that acted the way the flags do. They had heraldic crests. This is, here's two examples. We're going to talk about these today. Pretty cool. These are examples of, think of a knight's coat of arms. These are two very well, there's a lot going on in these two crests. Sometimes they would be very simple, just colors and a couple symbols on a shield. But those colors and those shields, those could be painted on your shield. Those could be put on your tunic that you wear over your armor. Those could be put on a flag. And every noble family, every nobleman had their own heraldic crest that was for them specifically. So if you have a big army going off to war, you might have a dozen big noblemen, really powerful noblemen. So you have a dozen heraldic crests right there in the front. But then every little guy has his own crest as well. You might have 20,000 knights, and each one of those knights counts as a minor nobleman. And so you have 20,000 different knights all wearing different colors. It could get a little confusing if there's a small group breaks away from the army and he meets another small group from another army, and you're like, wait a second, is the dude with the Christmas tree on on his shield, is that guy on our side or the enemy side? I don't remember. Um, but you would just have to learn which heraldic crests are on your side, which coat of arms are on the enemy side. Many noblemen would have their own personal crest. So you have your family coat of arms, but then if you are special enough, you might get your own coat of arms given to you. And that would probably start by you have the basis of your family's crest, and then you add something yourself. If you get married to a very powerful family, you have a powerful, like, princess or noble lady marrying a powerful noble man, they might add those two together and have two different crests on the same shield. And then going down the generations, you might have three or four or 16, or who knows how many different noble families are all jumbled together to make the modern family that you have. Only the noblemen had their own coat of arms, but each nobleman might have thousands of soldiers fighting for them, and they are all wearing that crest and color, not because it's theirs, but because it's their bosses. Now, let me read to you about these crests because these are really well thought out. They're very complicated, but each little bit has a meaning. I'm going to read to you off my phone article that I actually found 2 years ago. So 2 years ago when I taught this class, we looked at this. So this coat of arms up here is the royal coat of arms of the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom is England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. And here's the fancy way of describing what it is. Quarterly, first and fourth. That means quarterly, you cut it into four. The first and the fourth block, gules. That means red background. Three lions passant gardant. So you have three lions, and that pose is called passant gardant. Three lions passant gardant in pale or. Or means gold, so they're pale gold color. Armed and langed azure. That means that their fingernails, their claws, and their tongue, their lang, is blue, azure blue. And you can kind of see there that their tongues are bright blue. And this says that's for England. So this picture means England. Red background, three gold lions in that pose with blue tongues. Second quarter, or. Second quarter, background of yellow. A lion rampant, So standing up like that means rampant. A lion rampant within a double treasure flory counter flory gules. Double treasure flory counter flory means this weird square thing, picture frame. Gules means red, and that is for Scotland. Third quarter, azure, blue background. A harp or golden harp, stringed argent. The strings are made out of silver for Ireland. The whole surrounded by a garter. This blue is like a belt that they call a garter. For a crest upon the royal helm, there's the royal helm, the imperial crown proper. So there is one of the crowns of England, that's called the imperial crown. Thereon a lion statant gardent or. So there's a lion, and I guess I suppose it's called statant gardent. And he's made out of gold. A lion statant gardent or imperially crowned proper. So on top of the crown is a golden lion wearing the imperial crown. So he's wearing it and standing up. Okay. Thereon, I just read that, lion standing on or imperially crowned proper. Mantling or an ermine. So this fun stuff flourishes on the edge of the helmet is gold or an ermine, which is a little animal like a mink. It's bright white in the winter and has a little black tip on its tail. It's a really beautiful fur, and that would be a symbol of royalty. For supporters, dexter. Dexter means left. No, dexter means right. Sinister means left. So stage left and right, I guess. I don't know. Where are we? For supporters, dexter, a lion, rampant gardent, or crowned as the crest. So you have an imperial crown here, another of the same crown here, another of the same crown there. Sinister on the left side. A unicorn, argent, silver, armed, crined, and ungueled proper. Not entirely sure what armed, crined, and ungueled means. I believe that is talking about its mane and tail and everything. I could be wrong there. Gorged with a coronet or. So gorge, your gorget would be a fun little necklace thing. And he says for your neck, and that symbolized authority. For instance, there's lots of pictures in the Revolutionary War of people like George Washington with this little gold like half moon thing on their chest, and that's called a gorget. So the gorget necklace of this unicorn is a golden crown, not the imperial crown, a different golden crown, because the imperial crown has like a head to it. Unicorn head couldn't poke out. Gorged with a coronet or composed of crosses, patés, and fleur-de-lis. So on top of the crown, there's this special kind of cross and a fleur-de-lis. A chain affixed thereto, passing between the forelegs and reflexed over the back, also or. So there's this gold chain going from his collar all around there, also made out of gold. Motto, Dieu et mon droit. That means God and my right. That is the motto of the British royalty. In the compartment below the shield, with the Union rose, shamrock, and thistle engrafted on the same stem. Now this is highly symbolic. You see this rose that is red on the outside and white on the inside? That symbolizes the union of two warring houses. Have you heard of the Wars of the Roses? There was a civil war in England between two very powerful noble families. One was the House of Lancaster, the other was the House of York. One of them was symbolized with a red rose, the other one with a white rose. Well, guess what? The Duke of York, who had 10,000 men, rode him up to the top of the hill and rode him back again. The brave old Duke of York married the Lancastrian princess and became King Henry the VII. Or was he Lancastrian and married a Yorkish princess? I don't remember. Anyway, they got married, and to symbolize a new dynasty of union, they invented the Union rose, red and white. This would be like if after our Civil War, we took our American flag and mixed it with the Confederate flag and had like it mixed, blended to show that we're united again. Very interesting. So they have this Union rose. And by the way, that was Henry VII and his son Henry VIII, obviously a very powerful, important dude. Then it says the Union rose, the shamrock, and the thistle are all engrafted on the same stem. You have one stem, and coming out of it are three flowers. The British Union rose, the Scottish shamrock, or Scottish thistle, and the Irish shamrock, all on the same stem. We're all in this together. Pretty cool. This is, I think, pretty cool as well, because this is an ancient one. This one is very new. This is a coat of arms created for the Duchess of Sussex. This is Will and Kate. When Prince William married Kate, they gave her a brand new coat of arms. She's obviously an American. She doesn't have a coat of arms. So they made her a new coat of arms, and they really thought it through, and they gave her a lot of really interesting symbolism here. It includes a shield containing the color blue representing the Pacific Ocean and rays symbolizing sunshine. So these yellow are sunshine rays for her Californian beachside heritage. The lion supporting the shield on the left is an image that dates back to early medieval times and relates to her husband, the Duke of Sussex. So this is William's special lion, and he looks like he has a crown around his neck and a crown on his head, and that's William's special thing. The songbird supporting the shield on the right relates to the Duchess of Sussex. So the traditional Duchess of Sussex got a songbird, and now she gets that as well, and she has a crown indicating that she is a princess now. Beneath the shield is California's state flower, the golden poppy. Isn't that interesting? They're like, oh, you're from California? What flower should we get you? The golden poppy. And wintersweet, a flower that grows at Kensington Palace, which is the palace that was gifted to them at their wedding. So it's mixing her old home, California, with her new home, Kensington Palace. Those wintersweet flowers were also depicted on her wedding veil. The three quills, right here, represent the power of words and communication because she was an actress. The Duchess has also been assigned a coronet bearing fleur-de-lis and strawberry leaves. Interesting. That's not this, is it? No. I see fleur-de-lis there and the special crosses. Are those strawberry leaves? Might be. Interesting. Okay, yeah, so she gets a crown with fleur-de-lis and strawberry leaves. The Garter King of Arms, Thomas Woodcock, who is based at the College of Arms in London, said the Duchess of Sussex took a great interest in the design. Good heraldic design is nearly always simple, and the arms of the Duchess of Sussex stand well besides the historic beauty of the quartered British royal arms. So that means, this is her special thing, but here's her family thing, including the British lions and the Scottish lion there, and then the Irish harp. So all of this is put here, and then she's adding her new take on it. Isn't that interesting? Heraldry as a means of identification has flourished in Europe for almost 900 years and is associated with both individual people and great corporate bodies such as cities, universities, and for instance, the livery companies in the city of London. That's pretty cool. And you can't talk about the Middle Ages without talking about castles, of course. Castles were built to protect the town. And why did you need protection for every single town? I mean, Wiscasset doesn't have any walls. Wiscasset doesn't have a military. We have like 3 cops. What would happen if an army rolled into Wiscasset? We'd be defenseless, right? The thing is, we have the United States Army defending us. So no one dares attack Wiscasset because then they know, the United States military would get them. Okay. But back then there is no national army. All the armies are localized. So every town is for itself, really. So every town needs to defend itself, and every single town is a target and needs walls and castles. You are more likely to be attacked by a countryman than by a foreigner. In most battles of the Middle Ages involved two sides that spoke the same language, wore the same clothes, and really answered to the same king. Of course, there were plenty of international wars as well, but all these little skirmishes that happened day by day are just your neighbors trying to get an advantage, trying to take your stuff. Originally, a lot of these castles were just wooden forts built in, 3, 4, 500s AD. And they just evolved and grew over the years. And it's really cool to see a particular castle evolve and grow over the centuries. We already looked at the Motte and Bailey a little bit a couple lessons ago, where you have a mound, probably man-made, but of course you could take a hill and do that. A little bit of a moat here, not filled in with water, just a moat trying to make it harder for them to get to you. And then a little simple wooden enclosure called a Bailey, trying to protect the town, little drawbridge there. Then that would evolve to really the Normans brought this over. William the Conqueror in 1066 brought over the concept of the keep, which was just a fairly small stone structure, and it's just one tower, but it's much bigger than what we would consider a normal tower, but smaller than what we would consider a castle. It's a self-sufficient tower that would protect you in case of emergency. And then once you build that keep, you might build walls around the keep, and then walls around those walls, and walls around those walls. This is probably the most famous Norman keep. That is the White Tower, which is the basis of the Tower of London. By the way, in the last two pictures, the main entrance has not been at ground level. The main entrance is way up here. And that's because the main entrance is probably the weakest part of the structure. You have a wooden door there compared to stone walls. And the enemy might try to bring battering rams and break down your front door. But you can't bring a battering ram up a staircase, not a very big one at least. So that would be a huge help if only people with like swords and axes could get to your door. If you have like metal bars over it, that's going to take a very long time to just hack apart with a sword or something. Eventually, they built walls around the keeps, and those would be called curtain walls. Just big old walls, and then maybe another wall around that wall. Lots of ways to try to kill people as they're attacking you. A lot of doors would be built into the wall, not like flush with the wall, but recessed into the wall, so that you could have these things called murder holes, which are just what they sound. There's a floor up here, and there's holes in the floor, and you could drop things through the holes. You could drop big old rocks, you could shoot arrows down there, you could throw spears down there, boiling oil. Another thing they would do is get sand really hot, get a big pot full of sand over a fire and then throw it down, because the sand would get into your armor. If you have, really strong armor, things might be bouncing off your helmet and whatever, but the sand gets in the chinks and then cooks you, and ouch. Crenellations are the classic. Do I even have a picture here? I have here, yes. Right here at the top, these are crenellations. So those crenellations might be 6 or 8 feet tall, and you hide behind one of them as you're reloading your bow, and then you peek out and shoot, and then hide back and peek out and shoot, and really good defense there. Notice also that these are brought out a little bit, so you could probably throw things over the side. It also makes it very difficult to get ladders up there because the top is kind of jutting out a bit. And then over the years, every new generation builds another tower, builds another wall, and what started off as a tiny little Motte and Bailey ends up as a really formidable castle 1,000 years later. As engineering science advanced, they learned to make much bigger walls, much bigger towers. The towers got rounded, and that's so the battering rams and the stones being thrown at it bounce off or deflected to the side rather than all that energy going straight through. They also learned how to make slanted bases for the same reason, also making it harder to climb with ladders. That base is so significantly far away from the top that your ladder has to be much, much longer. And then, of course, easier to push off. You can drop rocks here and they'll roll down and cause a lot of damage. This is, I believe, a Syrian castle. They learned a lot of architecture from the Muslims that they attacked during the Crusades. So if I remember correctly, this is called the Crac des Chevaliers, or Crac des Chevaliers if you're American, and it just means the Knight's Castle, and it's a massive castle they built in Syria. Castles would cost millions upon millions of dollars in today's money, hundreds of millions of dollars, and they would take decades to finish. This castle was not built in a week. This castle may have taken 20 years to build from start to finish. But they would then last centuries. As you can see, this castle was probably built 700-800 years ago, and it's still pretty strong, and with just a bare amount of upkeep and maintenance, it'll last for another 1,000 years. Pretty cool. What would the people in the Middle Ages do for fun? By the way, talking about heraldry and everything, here's a dude with a dragon on his head. Okay, here's a dude with a green dog with a red tongue. Okay, that's fun chivalry there. Here's a dude with a shield diagonally green and red with a star, different types of lions on this one, all sorts of fun chivalric stuff there. Tournaments, they would have lots of tournaments. We talked about that briefly before, where you're just fighting, play fighting, but you're still fighting. And that would be like the Olympics. There would be heroes. There would be these athletes who are really good at their job. By the way, when we think of Henry VIII, we think of a great big old fat king. But he was actually very tall and very powerful. And when he was young, he was not overweight. He was an athlete, and he was very famous for jousting. He was very good at that when he was a teenager and young man. They would show off all kinds of martial arts, not just fighting on horses, but fighting off of horses, fighting with swords, fighting 1-on-1, 2-on-2, boxing, not exactly boxing like we have today, but, unarmed fighting, bows and arrows, all sorts of different kinds of fights. Here's a bunch of guys just trampling into battle, swinging those swords around. Here's a dude, and his coat of arms is 2 Christmas trees on his head. What are those? Looks like little rainbow fruits. So silly. There's a guy with like octopus tentacles on his head. Like, yo, I'm tough. I got weird stuff. And of course, who's watching? All the pretty ladies are watching. And actually, going to a tournament was a way of finding a wife. A nobleman who's single. Maybe he's not the richest guy ever. Maybe he's not, the most powerful noble ever. But if you're doing a good job in the tournament, there's all these eligible ladies watching, and you might find yourself a wife. Archery contest, swords, axes, mass melee where everyone's fighting, of course, jousting. When you won, you could win a bag of cash. You often won the enemy's armor and weapons, or their horse, or all of the above, so you can make a lot of money at the tournament. And of course, a lady's favor. The ladies would show their favor by giving you some kind of flag. They would often give you one of their hankies, and you'd like tie it around your spear or tie it around your horse's bridle or something, and go into battle with a pink flowery hanky. These 2 people jousting. I don't think that's terribly accurate. Those horses seem like they can't take more than 1 or 2 steps. But there you go, and there's all these spectators. The king, it looks like the king is watching, and you always want to be on the king's good side. This must be in France with a fleur-de-lis. That is the French king's thing, gold fleur-de-lis on a blue background. Blackmail was when you defeat an enemy, you hold him ransom. And you take his armor, which is incredibly expensive, and you probably don't have much use for 2 or 3 coats of armor. And by the way, coats of armor were tailor-made to be specific to your body, and so they might not fit very well. And you can't really change it very much once it's made. You can't like hem it or take it out or anything. So you probably don't want his armor, but he really wants his armor back, so he might buy it with cash. The weapons would be blunted, precautions were taken, but lots of people got injured, lots of people died. As you can see here is a spear going into the dude's eye. It looks like they have these helmets that are giving them almost no vision at all, just this tiny little speck of space, and the spear found its way into it. Not fun. Oh, look at that. Got our green dog guy. Here's a guy, broken lances, probably going to be knocked off his horse. You're wearing heavy armor and you're galloping full tilt, and you get knocked off that horse, that's going to knock the wind out of you. Well, the crowds are entertained. Soldiers got practice. When we're not fighting for real, we're fighting for practice. What would the noblemen do for fun? There were some sports that did not involve trying to kill people. It's trying to kill animals instead. Falconry. Using falcons to go hunt small animals was very popular among the rich, and it did require an awful lot of skill and training. That falcon, often from the time it's hatched to the time it dies, lives in the master's bedroom, by his bed. That's where it sleeps and is with him constantly, because if you don't train it well, You let it go. When it goes off, eats a rabbit, and never comes home. So you have to train it to hunt for you and kill for you, but not eat all the kill. So very popular among noblemen. In fact, they made laws that if you were not a nobleman, you weren't allowed to hunt, you weren't allowed to go falconing. Famous favorite pastime of kings. Very famously, Robin Hood became an outlaw because the people are starving and he goes out and hunts a deer and feeds the town with his venison. And the punishment for killing one of the king's deer is death. They were going to kill Robin Hood, according to the story, for feeding the town with venison because the king owns like most of the deer in all of England. It's like, well, the king hasn't been to this town, this Sherwood Forest, in like 6 years. So who cares if I eat a deer? The people are hungry. No, no, they're the king's deer. They're the lord's deer. You're not allowed to hunt. Hey, all forest animals are owned by the nobleman. Here you have some big old dogs that would be used in hunting. They still use dogs for fox hunting in England today. Has that been outlawed? I don't know. They did very recently. They would blow the horns and typically have like a whole crowd of people out there. And the dogs would chase the deer until the deer got tired and try to maybe chase them into like their den. Not really den. What do you call a place where deer sleep? Sometimes there would be a place where the deer would try to go hide and then stop running, and then the dogs would try to surround them and wait for the people to come up and stab them or whatever. Hunting could be very good practice for war, especially dangerous animals like wild boar. Boar were incredibly vicious. They could kill you very easily, and lots of people did die hunting boar. They're pretty big animals. In America, wild boar can grow up to a little over 1,000 pounds, I think, is the average for a big old boar. But even if they're not quite that big, they're right at knee height, and they have these huge tusks and razor sharp teeth, and they will bite and gouge with those tusks and get your femoral artery, and you could bleed out very quickly. In fact, the story of Jason and the Argonauts, Jason and the Golden Fleece. That story starts with Jason being tusked by a boar and bleeding out when some goddess Hera, I think it was Hera, saved his life and said, "Well, now you got to be my special hero." And again, they would have special like big old mastiffs bred for hunting those boar. And boar are big, they're fat, which means it's really hard to kill them because you have to get through a lot of fat to get to something vital. Otherwise, you're just making it angry. And you do not want to mess with an angry pig. Guys, even domesticated pigs, the pigs we get bacon from, they can be really nasty and get you. You got to be careful. But they would raise pigs, slaughter them before they get too big. And one thing pigs are really good at is finding truffles. Truffles are this really delicious mushroom that grows underground, and it grows on tree roots. And it is found mostly in the southern part of Europe, the Mediterranean area, so like northern Italy, southern France, that area. And they're supposedly amazingly delicious. And you can't see them because they're underground, but the pigs love them. The pigs will smell them, and you can train a pig to give a signal. By the way, you could train pigs at least as easily as you could train dogs. They can do all the tricks dogs can do, maybe even better. They're probably a little bit smarter than dogs. And you could train pigs to go find truffles and dig down. Today, a black truffle could be worth more than its weight in gold, worth more per ounce than gold is. You might get a truffle like that big, and it's worth like $200 or something. It's crazy. And yes, chocolate truffles got their name by looking like this little black knobbly thing, like a little black knobbly mushroom truffle. They had various types of board games. Chess and backgammon were very common in the Middle Ages. Chess has evolved quite a bit since it was first invented by the Persians, the Iranians back in the day. And in the early Middle Ages, there was one version of chess where you had dice. You had two different dice. One of them picked which piece you got to play, and the other one picked how much it could move, something like that. So a common question back in the day is, hey, you want to play chess? Sure. Dice or no dice? That's interesting. I like playing backgammon. Backgammon's fun. There's a picture of backgammon. If you don't know, that's just you roll dice to see how many places you can go, and you just try to get your pieces all the way around the board and off the board. So kind of like Sorry. And like Sorry, you can, or Parcheesi, you can stomp on the other person and send them back to the start. So that's always fun. They would hire jesters and fools to basically roast the noblemen. This was considered hilarious. They would get these jesters, and sometimes they would just sing songs or play games or, be like clowns. But sometimes they would like really roast the noblemen, like pick on them, something awful. And they were usually the only people who could criticize the noblemen, and they would brutally criticize the noblemen. And it was seen as a way to keep the noblemen's heads from getting too big. In the middle 1500s, King James VI of Scotland employed a jester by the name of George Buchanan. The young James was notoriously lazy when it came to signing official papers, and he often did so without reading the documents. Never sign a contract without reading it first. So Buchanan wrote a royal decree that abdicated the rule of all of Scotland to himself. For 2 weeks, 15 days, the boys signed it. After this, James, later King James I of England, never again signed a document without first reading it carefully. That is hilarious. It is a way of gently pointing out to the king, kind of gently pointing out to the king, you're making really stupid mistakes by signing official decrees without knowing what they say. You got to be more careful. Now imagine if a nobleman went to a boy king and said, started nagging him about reading the documents, off with his head. But if the jester does it, it's funny, it's a joke, it's a prank, and he gets away with it, and the jester got to be king for a couple weeks. This James is the King James of the King James Version. Besides the jesters, there would also be fools who just pretend to be stupid and whatever, clowns who just put on weird makeup and go crazy, jugglers, acrobats. Minstrels are traveling singers. They would play harps and all sorts of musical instruments. They did have something very much like a guitar called a lute. They had something like an oboe type thing, woodwind instruments and trumpets and brass musics of all kinds. But they would not only do songs, both singing and just instrumental, they would also recite poetry and stories. They would be the storytellers of the day, and they would be highly in demand. They had these epic feasts, and they would really go all out in the food department. They would have these really, really long tables, one for the noblemen on the dais up front, probably on a little stand, and then all these other long tables, and people are sitting at benches. They didn't have plates like we think of them today. They had pieces of bread, loaves of bread that were basically plate shaped. They're called trenchers. They would be very hard. Bread back then was very, very tough. Imagine like the toughest whole wheat bread you've ever had, times 1,000. So they probably didn't want to eat the bread unless it was soaked with grease and juices from all your meals and all the sauces from your meals. And in fact, the rich people wouldn't even bother eating the trenchers. They would pick up the trenchers and collect them and hand them out as charity to poor people. So can you imagine if like your dinner is literally not just licking off someone's plate, but eating someone's plate? Gross. They would sometimes have several hundred dishes at a feast. And we're not talking about like a middle class feast. We're talking about like the king's feast. We have hundreds and hundreds of dishes, which obviously you cannot eat everything. Even if this feast is lasting several days, you're not going to eat a tenth of what's there. Often they would make these hundreds of dishes, but if you're feeding 1,000 people, you only make one big bowl of this kind of dish and one big bowl of that kind of dish and one big bowl from that kind of dish, and they put them on different places of the table, and you don't pass them around. If you get sat next to the chicken, you eat chicken for dinner. If you get sat next to the beef, you eat beef for dinner. And lots of variety, but that doesn't mean any individual gets a lot of variety. They would eat pork, beef, chicken, venison, duck, goose, sparrow, fish, eels. Eels are still very popular in England. Not so much in America. Here is a roast pork. It is red and shiny because of the way they cook it. High temperatures for a very long time. Gets a caramelized crust there. Whole pig. Pretty fun. Apple in its mouth. They would have fun dishes like cockatrice. A cockatrice is a mythical beast that's half pig and half chicken, and they would make 2 of them at a go. They'd chop the chicken and the rooster and the piglet in half, and you'd have 2 different cockatrices, one with a rooster head and a pig butt, and the other one with a pig head and a rooster rear. Cockatrice, that's fun, making their own animals. Then they would make bird pies, which is literally a pie filled with birds. 4 and 20 blackbirds baked into a pie. When the pie was opened, the birds began to sing. So you go, wait a second, how do you bake 4 and 20 blackbirds and have them still alive at the end? Well, obviously you don't. You make a big empty pie shell, and the bottom of it probably has a hole in it, and you stuff a whole bunch of live blackbirds in it last minute, and you bring it out, and you're like, ladies and gentlemen, here's the world's biggest pie, and then you cut a big slice, and oh, surprise, there's birds pooping in there. And obviously you don't eat that. It's just like a surprise pop out food. I don't know. There's some blackbirds bursting out of a pie, and that cook looks very pleased with himself. Wasn't that a dainty dish to set before a king? They had plenty of desserts, no sugar though. So their desserts probably would not have been nearly as sweet as ours. But they had sweet rolls, cakes, pudding, pies, pastries of all kinds. They would use honey, which would be fairly common among the rich folks. They would have their own beekeepers, and they'd use the wax for candles, and they would use the honey for sweetening their stuff. They'd also have a lot of wine and fruit juice reductions. So if you take wine and you boil it for like hours and hours and hours and hours, I think I saw it on Tasting History with Max Miller on YouTube. One method of making a wine reduction is you boil it to like, I think 2/3 of the liquid is gone, and that leaves a very, very sweet, kind of like syrupy thing left over, kind of like balsamic vinegar, which, by the way, balsamic vinegar is made from wine, boiled to death. And then lots of fruits, nuts, and vegetables. And really, the fruits and nuts count as dessert. So we're spoiled for desserts today, but that is a very modern thing with the abundance of cheap sugar. Back in the day, an apple was considered a treat. A handful of grapes is considered a huge luxury. That's why you see, Nero eating a cluster of grapes or something, because that's like a pinnacle of dessert is a bunch of grapes. They would also eat a lot of things that we wouldn't, things like liver, kidney, tongues, hooves, and tails. Some of this is just based on necessity. If you're starving, you don't throw food away. And livers and kidneys might not taste the best, but they're calories, and I'm hungry, so I'm going to eat them. Some of this, though, Americans just get squeamish at them. For instance, the tongue is apparently, a beef tongue can be like this big. They're huge, and apparently they taste really good. Like it tastes as good as the steak does. And I don't know why Americans don't eat the beef tongue. We just put it in dog food or something today. There you go. Pickled pig's feet, I've seen that. Hooves have a lot of gelatin in them, so you could boil them down and make a meat-flavored jello. That would be very common. Fish bones also have a lot of jello, so fish-flavored jello was also a thing back then. Tail has a lot of fat and cartilage in it, so when you boil that forever and ever and ever, that thickens up the soup or the sauce a whole lot. So oxtail is making a comeback in fancy restaurants, and tongue is making a comeback in fancy restaurants. Sometimes rich people just wanted weird food, because I thought the weirder the food is, the more luxurious it is. So bring me a trout tongue or a goose's liver or something. Actually, pâté foie gras, that is goose liver, is supposed to be super delicious and expensive. So I don't know. Go eat something crazy today, kids. Oh, there's an eel. Fishing for eels. Eel pie is a British luxury. If I ever get to England, I'm going to eat me an eel pie. Say it tastes like muddy fish. Yay. This is apparently a real thing found in medieval cookbooks. You take a pig, you cook it. You take a rooster, you cook it. And then you give the rooster, all this armor. And you make the rooster a knight. And you put him on top of the pig, and you'd often give it the Lord's armor. So imagine if your personal coat of arms was now a knight riding a pig. And here is a fish pie with whole fish poking out. Nice. Ooh, peacock. See, they would pluck the peacock, cook it, and then put the feathers back on. Fun. So for your homework, I would like you to make your own coat of arms. So either download a picture of a shield. You can just Google blank shield or something and make your own coat of arms, and you'll find plenty of different kinds of shields. But just draw a simple triangular shield or whatever, and then draw your own coat of arms. I do want you to think about it a little bit and make some things with some sort of meaning to them. It doesn't have to be super deep. I think if I remember correctly, it was Maddie last time who drew like a mango and said, always eat mangoes or something like that in Latin. Which is really funny. But draw your own coat of arms. I would like you to have at least 5 different elements to it. 5 different elements. So that could be anything. It could be different pictures on the shield, stripies, stars, whatever. It could be something on top of the shield, like a crown. It could be animals or something on the side of the shield. Say you like horses. Okay, put a horse head there or something. I don't know. Say you have a pet hamster. Draw a picture of a hamster or something. Doesn't have to be, crazy meaningful, and it definitely does not have to be period accurate. So I don't want you looking up what is the official way to draw a hamster on a coat of arms. Okay, just do your own thing. Okay, but maybe have a motto on the bottom. That would be an interesting part of your 5 elements. Maybe, you saw earlier there was some coat of arms with flowers on the bottom. Maybe have your own special flower. I don't know. Just do something. Maybe you could have your coat of arms quartered, and each little quarter has a different thing to it. That would be 4 right there. That would be very interesting. Be creative. Take a little while to do this. I would really love to see an interesting coat of arms, personal coat of arms for you to hang up in the hallway or something when I get back. All right? All right. Have fun, guys.